Officer Lance Garrett's eyes lock onto Kiana Blackwood as she exits the Creekside Community Center with a designer backpack slung over her shoulder. 18 years of prejudice disguised as police work have trained him to see expensive items on young black women as evidence of drug money rather than legitimate success. "Ma'am, Creekside Police," Garrett calls out while his hand moves toward his weapon. "We need to speak with you about suspicious activity in this area." Kiana pauses. Her criminal justice graduate studies providing understanding of constitutional rights, while her father's position as police chief taught her that street encounters rarely follow textbook procedures. She has no idea these officers are about to make the biggest mistake of their careers. Dr. Olivia Barnes watches from her car, recognizing the developing confrontation. Zoe Campbell activates her phone camera, her journalism instinct sensing a story unfolding. Neither officer realizes they're about to arrest the daughter of Chief Vernon Blackwood, the man who signs their paychecks and holds their careers in his hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Creekside Valley, Tennessee, represents the changing face of the New South, where rapid population growth has transformed a once homogeneous community of 95,000 into a diverse city struggling with the tensions that demographic shifts often create. The downtown district showcases gleaming corporate headquarters and trendy restaurants, while neighborhoods like East Creekside maintain their working-class character with community centers that serve as lifelines for families. Navigating economic uncertainty, the Creekside Community Center stands as a beacon of hope in a neighborhood where Chief Vernon Blackwood has focused much of his reform efforts since taking command 18 months ago. The brick building houses after-school programs, job training workshops, and mentorship initiatives designed to bridge the gap between police and community, programs that his daughter Kiana helps coordinate through her graduate studies in criminal justice. Chief Blackwood's appointment came after a federal consent decree forced the city to address decades of discriminatory policing practices that had eroded community trust and resulted in multiple civil rights lawsuits. His mandate from Mayor Vivian Moss was clear: transform a department culture that tolerated racial bias or face federal takeover of law enforcement operations. The challenge proved more complex than expected. While Blackwood successfully recruited diverse officers like Ethan Valdez and promoted reform-minded leaders like Captain Diana Reeves, veteran officers like Lance Garrett and Cole Hendricks represent institutional resistance to change. Their 19 and 14 years of service respectively came during an era when aggressive enforcement tactics and racial profiling were tacitly encouraged through performance metrics that valued arrest numbers over community relationships. Garrett's personnel file contains 7 citizen complaints alleging racial bias, but union protection and insufficient evidence have prevented meaningful discipline. His partnership with Hendricks creates an echo chamber where prejudiced assumptions get reinforced rather than challenged, while Sergeant Frank Caldwell's old guard supervision provides cover for behavior that conflicts with department reforms. The community center sits at the intersection of progress and resistance, where Kiana's volunteer work with at-risk youth represents the bridge building that her father envisions for police-community relations. Her criminal justice education at Tennessee State University emphasized constitutional policing and procedural justice, concepts that seem theoretical until confronted with the reality of officers whose biases override. Training, Dr. Olivia Barnes' presence outside the center reflects the professional families, increasingly drawn to Creekside Valley's affordable housing and quality schools. Her work in the emergency room has shown her the consequences of police encounters gone wrong, making her sensitive to situations where routine questioning might escalate into constitutional violations. Zoe Campbell represents the new generation of activists who understand that documentation can be as powerful as protest. Her journalism major at Creekside University includes coursework on media ethics and civil rights history, providing context for recognizing when ordinary police encounters reflect deeper patterns of institutional bias. The afternoon timing creates perfect conditions for misunderstanding. Garrett and Hendricks patrol during shift change when supervision is minimal, while the community center's location in East Creekside reinforces their assumptions about crime and demographics. Their radio chatter reflects departmental culture that still struggles with the tension between traditional enforcement and community policing. Chief Blackwood's office sits 3 miles away in the municipal complex, where his afternoon is consumed with budget meetings and policy reviews that seem disconnected from street-level policing, until moments like this shatter the illusion of institutional control. His reforms look impressive on paper, but changing hearts and minds requires more than policy manuals and training seminars. The irony runs deep through Creekside's transformation. A city that hired its first black police chief to address racism now faces the test of whether leadership can overcome the embedded prejudices of officers who view reform as political correctness rather than professional necessity. Kiana's presence in the community represents her father's vision of police legitimacy through service, but Garrett's approach reflects the old model of control through intimidation. The stage is set for a collision between past and future, where 18 months of careful reform work hangs in the balance of a single encounter that will test whether institutional change can survive, individual prejudice, and whether family bonds can bridge the divide between badge and community. Kiana Blackwood embodies the intersection of two worlds that rarely meet with understanding. The daughter of law enforcement leadership who chose to dedicate her life to serving the communities that police often fail. At 25, her biracial heritage reflects America's changing demographics, while her experiences navigating predominantly white institutions prepared her for the complexities of social justice work in divided communities. Her childhood was shaped by tragedy and resilience in equal measure. When her Latina mother Maria died in a car accident 10 years ago, 8-year-old Kiana faced the reality of being raised by a single father whose demanding career in law enforcement often meant long hours and emotional distance. Chief Blackwood's struggle to balance parenting with police work taught both father and daughter about sacrifice, responsibility, and the weight of public service. Growing up as a police chief's daughter created unique challenges in school and social settings. Her peers often viewed her with suspicion, too privileged for some, too different for others. These experiences taught her to build bridges across divides while maintaining her authentic identity, skills that would prove invaluable in her current work with at-risk youth who often view police as adversaries rather than protectors. Her undergraduate studies at Tennessee State University opened her eyes to the historical context of policing in black communities. Criminal justice coursework exposed her to research on implicit bias, procedural justice, and community policing models that contrasted sharply with the enforcement-heavy approach she witnessed during her father's early career. These academic insights created productive tension in their dinner-table conversations about police reform. The decision to pursue graduate studies while working with community organizations reflected Kiana's belief that sustainable change requires both theoretical understanding and grassroots engagement. Her thesis research on police legitimacy in minority communities provides academic framework for the bridge-building work she performs at the Creekside Community Center, where teenagers often share stories about negative police encounters. Her volunteer coordination role involves designing programs that prepare young people for college while teaching them about their constitutional rights and civic responsibilities. These workshops often include discussions about interacting with police, conversations that take on personal significance given her father's position, and her own commitment to justice for all community members. The complexity of her position creates daily internal conflicts. She loves her father and respects his commitment to reform, but she also witnesses the skepticism of community members who view police promises with warranted suspicion based on historical experience. Her role requires building trust while acknowledging legitimate grievances about law enforcement practices. Her relationship with Chief Blackwood has evolved from traditional parent-child dynamics to collaborative partnership in pursuing police reform. Their conversations blend family affection with professional consultation, as she provides insights about community perspectives that might not reach him through official channels. This unique position makes her a valuable bridge between badge and neighborhood. Her social circle includes young professionals, community activists, and graduate students who often express surprise about her family connection to law enforcement. These relationships require constant navigation between personal loyalty and political principles, teaching her diplomatic skills that prove valuable in her mediation work between police and community. The designer backpack that caught Officer Garrett's attention contains research materials for her thesis, volunteer coordinator supplies, and personal items that reflect her academic success and professional aspirations. The bag represents achievement through hard work rather than illicit income. But racial bias creates assumptions that facts cannot easily overcome. Her criminal justice education emphasized constitutional protections and procedural rights that should govern police encounters. But her community work revealed the gap between legal theory and street reality. Today's encounter will test whether her knowledge and family connections can protect her from the prejudices that affect countless young people in similar circumstances. Her father's reform efforts created hope that institutional change might prevent discriminatory encounters. But Kiana understands that changing policies requires changing hearts and minds, a process that takes generations rather than months. Her presence in East Creekside represents faith in that process, even when individual officers resist progress. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When aggressive policing and racial profiling were tacitly encouraged through performance metrics that valued arrest statistics over community relationships. His badge carries the weight of institutional authority, while his prejudices reflect broader cultural biases that police reform efforts struggle to address through policy changes alone. His career trajectory followed traditional patterns for white officers in departments that prioritized crime suppression over community engagement. Early commendations for drug arrests and gang suppression created advancement opportunities, while citizen complaints about excessive force and racial bias became administrative footnotes that union representation typically dismissed through procedural challenges and insufficient evidence claims. The 7 formal complaints in Garrett's personnel file represent a fraction of community grievances that never reached official channels due to distrust of internal investigation processes and fear of retaliation. His reputation in East Creekside reflects years of aggressive enforcement that treated symptoms rather than causes, while viewing residents as potential criminals rather than citizens deserving constitutional protection. His partnership with Officer Cole Hendricks creates mutual reinforcement for biased assumptions and discriminatory practices. Their radio conversations often include coded language about high crime demographics and suspicious behavior patterns that mask racial profiling behind professional terminology. This collaboration enables misconduct by normalizing bias through shared prejudices. Garrett's resistance to Chief Blackwood's reforms manifests through passive-aggressive compliance that follows policy letters while violating their spirit. His attendance at bias training sessions comes with eye-rolling skepticism and whispered complaints about political correctness undermining effective law enforcement. These attitudes influence younger officers who might otherwise embrace reform principles. His worldview reflects broader cultural anxieties about demographic change and social justice, movements that challenge traditional law enforcement approaches. Media consumption emphasizes crime statistics and officer safety concerns while avoiding deeper examination of how police practices affect community trust and constitutional rights. This information diet reinforces existing prejudices rather than promoting critical self-reflection. The financial pressures of middle-class life create additional stress that manifests through workplace frustration and community resentment. His suburban mortgage and family expenses contrast with his perception of urban youth carrying expensive items, creating assumptions about illegal income sources that override constitutional presumptions of innocence and equal treatment. Sergeant Frank Caldwell's supervision enables Garrett's behavior through deliberate inattention and institutional protection that prioritizes unit cohesion over accountability. Their generational alignment on enforcement philosophy creates barriers to reform, while union representation provides legal protection against disciplinary actions that might otherwise correct problematic behavior patterns. His training emphasized crime detection and arrest procedures while de-emphasizing constitutional compliance and community relations. Academy education from 15 years ago included minimal diversity training or bias recognition, leaving gaps in professional development that current reform efforts attempt to address through supplemental education and policy modifications. The demographic changes in Creekside Valley challenge Garrett's comfort zone as traditional enforcement methods face scrutiny from educated communities that understand constitutional rights and procedural protections. His response involves increased suspicion rather than improved community engagement, creating cycles of mistrust that undermine police legitimacy. His interactions with minority youth reflect broader patterns of assumption and stereotyping that transform routine encounters into constitutional violations. Expensive clothing becomes evidence of criminal activity, while confident demeanor suggests disrespect for authority, creating pretexts for searches and arrests that target behavior patterns rather than specific criminal conduct. The afternoon patrol puts Garrett in East Creekside during shift change when supervisory oversight is minimal, and radio traffic focuses on call response rather than community policing initiatives. This timing creates opportunities for discretionary enforcement that reflects personal bias rather than department policy or constitutional requirements. His approach to policing emphasizes control through intimidation rather than cooperation through respect, reflecting philosophical differences with reform-oriented leadership. These methods produce immediate compliance while undermining long-term community relationships and institutional legitimacy that effective policing requires in democratic societies. Today's encounter with Kiana represents the collision between old guard assumptions and new demographic realities, where his prejudices about young black women will meet the daughter of the man whose reform agenda threatens everything Garrett believes about effective law enforcement. His ignorance about her family connection will transform routine harassment into career-ending catastrophe. Garrett's radio crackles with fabricated urgency as he reports suspicious individual, matching Bolo description in the 1400 block of Community Center Drive, creating official justification for an encounter based entirely on racial profiling rather than specific criminal activity. His experience with report writing enables creative documentation that transforms bias into legitimate police work. Ma'am, we've received reports of drug activity in this area, and you match the description of a suspect, Garrett announces, while his hand remains positioned near his weapon in an intimidation gesture that violates department training about respectful citizen encounters. His voice carries the authority of 18 years, enforcing his version of order. Kiana's criminal justice education provides immediate recognition of Fourth Amendment violations occurring in real time. Officer, what specific reasonable suspicion do you have about my behavior? I've been attending a community Meeting and walking to my car, her respectful response, demonstrates the constitutional knowledge that her academic work emphasizes. Officer Hendricks positions himself to create tactical advantage, while his body language mirrors his partner's aggressive posture. Their coordination reflects years of they practice intimidating community members through overwhelming displays of authority, designed to prevent resistance rather than ensure constitutional compliance. Dr. Barnes recognizes the developing confrontation through her emergency room experience treating victims of police encounters gone wrong. Her medical training emphasizes intervention when witnessing behavior that threatens patient safety. But her position as bystander limits options for direct action without escalating the situation. I need to see some identification and search that backpack, Garrett demands without constitutional justification, while his tone suggests non-compliance will result in arrest. His assumption about drug money motivates phishing expedition designed to generate charges rather than investigate specific criminal activity. Zoe Campbell's journalism training kicks in as she begins live streaming the encounter through social media, platforms that can instantly amplify police misconduct to thousands of viewers. Her phone captures high-definition footage that will become crucial evidence if the situation escalates into civil rights violations. "Sir, I don't consent to any search." Kiana responds with constitutional precision while maintaining respectful tone that her father's training emphasized for police encounters. "I'm happy to provide identification, but I'd like to understand the legal basis for this detention and search request." Hendricks attempts to justify the encounter through fabricated reports. "We've had multiple break-ins in this area, and expensive items carried by certain demographics often indicate involvement in criminal activity." His coded language masks racial profiling behind professional terminology. The backup request activates as Garrett keys his radio with exaggerated concern. Unit 23 requesting additional units for uncooperative suspect refusing lawful orders. His escalation transforms constitutional compliance into criminal resistance through false radio reports that will become evidence of misconduct. Officer Ethan Valdez responds to backup call while his rookie training emphasized de-escalation and constitutional compliance that conflicts with the aggressive approach he observes from veteran officers. His presence adds witness testimony that could support either accountability or cover-up depending on his courage. "Young lady, your attitude suggests you're hiding something." Garrett continues his psychological pressure campaign while community members begin gathering to observe the encounter. His experience with intimidation typically produces compliance, but Kiana's legal knowledge enables resistance that frustrates his control mechanisms. Mr. Harold Pierce approaches from his porch where 40 years of teaching provided skills for recognizing injustice and protecting young people from abuse. His community elder status grants moral authority that police encounters often lack, but his presence could also escalate tensions if officers view him as threat. The community center's proximity to Chief Blackwood's reform initiatives creates additional irony, as his daughter faces exactly the type of discriminatory policing that his policies attempt to prevent. The location symbolizes progress, while the encounter represents persistent institutional problems that resist policy solutions. Captain Diana Reeves monitors radio traffic from headquarters, while her loyalty to Chief Blackwood's reform agenda conflicts with immediate need to support officers in field. Her administrative position provides authority to intervene, but distance from scene limits real-time oversight capabilities. "Mom, place your hands behind your back," Garrett commands, while producing handcuffs that represent escalation beyond constitutional justification. His decision to arrest transforms harassment into federal civil rights violation, while multiple recording devices document the progression from bias to misconduct. The tension reaches breaking point as constitutional knowledge meets institutional prejudice, while family Loyalty will soon collide with badge authority in ways that neither officer anticipates. Their assumptions about community powerlessness will encounter devastating correction through connections they never considered possible. The handcuffs click around Kiana's wrists with metallic finality that echoes through the gathering crowd like gunshots in the peaceful afternoon air. Her constitutional rights dissolve under Garrett's badge authority, while his fabricated charges transform community service into criminal activity through the power of police reporting and prosecutorial discretion. Kiana Blackwood, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, resisting arrest and suspected drug possession. Garrett announces with theatrical authority, while his lack of evidence makes every charge a constitutional violation documented by multiple recording devices that will later expose his misconduct to federal investigators. Dr. Barnes abandons medical neutrality as her Hippocratic oath compels intervention when witnessing harm. Officers, this woman has done nothing wrong. I've observed this entire encounter, and you're violating her constitutional rights. Her physician credentials provide credibility that police testimony typically overrides. Zoe Campbell's livestream reaches hundreds of viewers as her social media followers witness police misconduct in real time. Comments flood her screen with outrage and legal advice, while viewers share footage across platforms that will amplify the incident beyond local boundaries into national conversation about police accountability. Get back, ma'am, or you'll be arrested for interfering with police business. Hendricks threatens Dr. Barnes, while his definition of interference includes constitutional witness testimony that could expose their misconduct. His attempt to silence witnesses violates First Amendment protections that his oath requires him to uphold. Kiana maintains dignity despite physical restraint, while her criminal justice education provides framework for surviving police encounters that violate constitutional protections. I'm not resisting. I'm requesting your badge numbers and supervisor contact information for filing formal complaints about this illegal detention, officer. Valdez arrives as backup with growing discomfort about veteran misconduct that contradicts his academy training about constitutional policing and community relations. His rookie status creates pressure to support colleague solidarity, while his moral compass recognizes clear civil rights violations requiring intervention. Officers, what's the probable cause for this arrest? Harold Pierce demands with educator authority that 40 years of protecting students provided. His community elder status commands respect, while his direct challenge threatens police authority that depends on public deference rather than constitutional compliance. The crowd grows larger as word spreads through the neighborhood about police harassment outside the community center. Residents emerge from nearby buildings with phones recording, while their collective presence creates accountability pressure that individual encounters typically lack through isolation and intimidation. Sergeant Caldwell receives radio notification about community disturbance requiring supervisory response, while his protection of problem officers creates liability for misconduct that federal oversight monitors through consent decree compliance. His arrival will determine whether accountability or cover-up prevails. This young woman matches the description of a drug suspect, and her uncooperative attitude indicates criminal behavior. Garrett justifies his arrest through circular reasoning that transforms constitutional knowledge into suspicious activity. His fabricated narrative will crumble under scrutiny but serves immediate purposes. Pastor Michael Adams approaches with religious authority that community policing initiatives supposedly embrace through faith partnerships. Brother officers, I know this young woman from our community programs. She's never been involved in criminal activity. This appears to be a misunderstanding requiring correction. The arrest becomes public spectacle as patrol cars arrive with flashing lights that transform routine harassment into major incident, requiring administrative attention. Each additional officer creates witnesses to misconduct, while their response validates Garrett's fabricated emergency through institutional support. Kiana's phone rings in her pocket with incoming call from her father's office, where afternoon meetings cannot shield him from developing crisis that will test 18 months of reform work. The timing creates perfect irony as his policies face real-world test through his daughter's experience. I want to make a phone call. Kiana requests through constitutional protections that arrest procedures require, despite officer resistance, to accountability. Her legal knowledge enables navigation of criminal justice system while her family connection remains hidden beneath surface assumptions about powerlessness. The breaking point arrives as community anger meets police authority, while constitutional violations accumulate under surveillance that will transform individual harassment into federal investigation. Garrett's career-ending mistake approaches revelation that will expose how family connections can create accountability when institutional systems fail. Kiana's phone continues ringing from her backpack while Officer Garrett debates whether to allow the call that arrests typically permit. His hesitation stems from desire to control narrative rather than constitutional compliance, but procedural requirements eventually force him to honor her request for communication that will transform everything. "I'd like to call my father," Kiana states with calm authority, while her family connection remains hidden beneath Garrett's assumptions about community demographics and social status. Her academic background enables strategic thinking about how revelation will impact the officers whose misconduct has crossed constitutional boundaries into federal violations. Dr. Barnes documents badge numbers and patrol car identifications, while her medical training emphasizes detailed observation that could support legal action. Officers Garrett and Hendricks, badge numbers 1847 and 2156, arresting this woman without probable cause at 3:47 p.m. outside Creekside Community Center. Zoe Campbell's live stream captures the moment when Kiana's phone call will reveal family connections that transform routine harassment into departmental crisis. Her journalism background recognizes developing story that could influence police, accountability, and community relations throughout the region. "Dad, it's Kiana." She speaks into her phone with daughter's familiarity, while her calm voice contrasts sharply with the chaos surrounding her arrest. "I'm being arrested outside the community center by Officers Garrett and Hendricks. They violated my Fourth Amendment rights and fabricated charges." The words hang in afternoon air like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. Garrett's face begins processing implications, while his limited understanding of department hierarchy prevents immediate recognition of catastrophic mistake that will end his career and expose institutional problems. Harold Pierce recognizes family connection through community knowledge about Chief Blackwood's daughter, while his educator background provides understanding of how power dynamics will shift dramatically. "Officers, do you realize who you've arrested?" His question carries weight of institutional accountability. "Sir, I don't care who her father is," Garrett responds with bravado that masks growing anxiety about complaint procedures and administrative review. His 18 years of union protection create false confidence about immunity from consequences that federal oversight eliminates through consent decree requirements. Officer Valdez realizes rookie mistake of supporting veteran misconduct, while his academy training emphasized constitutional compliance over colleague loyalty. His career preservation requires distancing from civil rights violations that federal investigators monitor through pattern analysis and individual case review. Hendricks attempts damage control through procedural compliance. "Ma'am, you're entitled to one phone call after booking procedures at the station." His effort to contain revelation comes too late as family connection spreads through crowd whose understanding changes everything about accountability. Pastor Adams recognizes Chief Blackwood's daughter through community involvement, while his faith-based police partnerships provide direct access to reform leadership. Officers, you've arrested the police chief's daughter. This situation requires immediate supervisor intervention and administrative review. The revelation ripples through gathering crowd like wildfire as community members process information that police misconduct targeted law enforcement family. Their understanding of power dynamics shifts dramatically while recording devices capture moment when accountability becomes inevitable. Sergeant Caldwell receives emergency radio notification about Chief's daughter arrest, while his protection of problem officers creates personal liability for misconduct. His administrative position requires immediate response, while his resistance to reform creates internal conflict about damage control versus accountability. Release her immediately, Caldwell orders upon arrival, while his recognition of political disaster overrides institutional solidarity. His attempt to minimize consequences comes too late, as federal violations require comprehensive investigation, regardless of family connections or administrative preferences. Captain Reeves receives chief notification about daughter's arrest, while her reform alliance with Blackwood creates urgency for constitutional compliance and accountability. Her arrival will determine whether incident becomes learning opportunity or institutional crisis requiring federal intervention. The power reversal transforms Garrett from authority figure to defendant in potential federal case, while his assumptions about community powerlessness face devastating correction through family connections that grant access to institutional accountability typically denied to individual victims. Chief Blackwood's arrival becomes inevitable as emergency protocols activate, while his daughter's experience tests 18 months of reform work through personal involvement that eliminates administrative distance from community grievances about police misconduct and constitutional violations. Chief Vernon Blackwood's patrol car arrives with emergency lights that transform community gathering into official crisis requiring immediate administrative response. His 18 months of reform work collide with personal anguish as he witnesses his daughter in handcuffs while his officers' misconduct threatens everything he's built toward constitutional policing. Take those handcuffs off my daughter immediately. Chief Blackwood commands with authority that eliminates any doubt about family connection, while his voice carries parental fury and professional disappointment that Garrett's career cannot survive. His presence transforms routine harassment into departmental emergency. Garrett's hands tremble as he processes career-ending mistake, while his assumptions about community demographics dissolve under revelation of family connection to department leadership. 18 years of service evaporate instantly as constitutional violations against Chief's daughter eliminate any possibility of administrative protection or union defense. Dr. Barnes approaches Chief Blackwood with medical professional authority, while her witness testimony provides crucial evidence about constitutional violations. Chief, I observed the entire encounter. Your officers violated your daughter's Fourth Amendment rights through illegal detention, search and arrest without probable cause. Zoe Campbell's live stream reaches thousands of viewers as dramatic reversal demonstrates how family connections can create accountability when institutional systems fail individual victims. Her social media platforms amplify footage that will influence police reform discussions throughout Tennessee and beyond. Officers Garrett and Hendricks, you're both immediately suspended pending federal investigation. Chief Blackwood announces, while his administrative authority eliminates employment security for misconduct that violates consent decree requirements. His daughter's experience personalizes community grievances about discriminatory policing. Officer Valdez documents incident details, while his rookie status provides protection through cooperation with accountability measures. His testimony will support constitutional compliance while demonstrating how reform training conflicts with veteran misconduct that resists institutional change. Harold Pierce approaches Chief Blackwood with community elder respect, while his 40 years of education provide credibility for witness testimony. Chief, your officer's behavior today represents exactly the kind of discrimination your reforms are supposed to prevent. The community was watching. Pastor Adams offers spiritual support, while his faith-based police partnerships provide framework for healing community relationships damaged by misconduct. Chief Blackwood, this incident creates opportunity for authentic accountability that your reform efforts need to succeed. Sergeant Caldwell faces immediate administrative review, while his supervision of problem officers creates liability for misconduct that federal oversight monitors. His protection of Garrett through institutional loyalty becomes personal accountability requiring career consequences. Captain Reeves coordinates damage control, while her reform alliance with Chief Blackwood emphasizes constitutional compliance over colleague protection. Her administrative response will determine whether incident becomes isolated misconduct or evidence of systematic problems requiring comprehensive federal intervention. Kiana, are you hurt? Chief Blackwood asks with father's concern, while his professional responsibilities require documentation of constitutional violations that his officers committed. His dual role as parent and reformer creates emotional complexity that community members observe with understanding. Internal affairs activation begins immediately as Inspector Janet Noble receives notification about Chief's daughter arrest requiring comprehensive investigation. Her professional standards enforcement will determine whether accountability mechanisms protect community members or shield problematic officers through administrative procedures. Federal notification becomes mandatory as civil rights violations against police family member trigger reporting requirements under consent decree oversight. FBI agent Rebecca Nash will review incident for pattern analysis that could influence department-wide accountability measures. The community response shifts from anger to cautious optimism as Chief Blackwood's personal experience with police misconduct validates their grievances while creating opportunity for authentic reform through leadership, accountability that previous complaints never achieved. Media attention intensifies as Zoe Campbell's footage spreads across social platforms, while local news outlets recognize story that combines police reform, family drama, and constitutional violations into compelling narrative about institutional change and community justice. Mayor Moss receives emergency briefing, while her political oversight of police reform faces tests through Chief's family experience that eliminates administrative distance from community concerns about discriminatory policing and constitutional compliance. Federal investigation launches within 24 hours as FBI agent Rebecca Nash coordinates civil rights inquiry, while Chief Blackwood's daughter's experience triggers comprehensive review of departmental practices under consent decree oversight. The personal becomes political as family. Connections enable accountability typically denied to individual victims. Officer Garrett faces immediate termination as his 18-year career dissolves through documented constitutional violations that union protection cannot defend. His personnel file reveals pattern of discriminatory behavior, while his arrest of Chief's daughter eliminates any possibility of administrative clemency or procedural delays. Officer Hendricks receives similar consequences as his partnership in civil rights violations creates equal liability, despite follower rather than leader role. His 14 years of service end through complicity in misconduct that federal oversight monitors through individual accountability and institutional reform requirements. Sergeant Caldwell's supervisory failure results in demotion, while his protection of problem officers creates administrative liability for constitutional violations. His resistance to reform efforts becomes evidence of institutional problems requiring leadership changes throughout departmental hierarchy. Chief Blackwood implements immediate policy changes, while his daughter's experience provides authentic understanding of community grievances about police misconduct. His reform efforts gain credibility through personal involvement that eliminates administrative distance from constitutional violations. Civil rights settlement provides Kiana $750,000, while her donation to community organizations demonstrates commitment to institutional change rather than personal enrichment. Her experience becomes catalyst for comprehensive reform that protects future victims through enhanced accountability and constitutional compliance. Officer Valdez receives commendation for constitutional compliance, while his rookie training becomes template for department-wide education, emphasizing civil rights protection over colleague loyalty. His career advancement demonstrates how reform creates opportunities for officers committed to constitutional policing. Captain Reeves assumes expanded authority, as reform implementation requires leadership committed to institutional change. Her administrative response to misconduct establishes precedent for accountability that community trust requires through consistent enforcement of constitutional standards. Dr. Barnes's witness testimony influences medical community advocacy for police accountability, while her professional credibility supports civil rights enforcement. Her intervention demonstrates how community members can protect constitutional rights through active engagement and expert testimony. Zoe Campbell's journalism receives state recognition, while her documentation of police misconduct influences media coverage of law enforcement accountability. Her social media platforms become model for citizen journalism that enables transparency and community protection. Federal oversight increases through enhanced monitoring, while Chief Blackwood's family experience validates community concerns that previous complaints never adequately addressed. The consent decree gains enforcement mechanisms that protect constitutional rights through systematic accountability. Community trust improves as authentic accountability demonstrates police leadership commitment to reform rather than rhetoric. Chief Blackwood's willingness to hold officers accountable for misconduct against his own family creates credibility that policy statements alone cannot achieve. Training programs undergo comprehensive revision, while Kiana's experience becomes case study for constitutional compliance education. Her criminal justice expertise guides curriculum development that emphasizes civil rights protection through procedural knowledge and cultural competence. Inspector Noble's investigation results in systematic review of complaint procedures, while previous grievances receive renewed attention through enhanced accountability mechanisms. Her professional standards enforcement eliminates administrative barriers that previously protected problematic officers. The incident influences state legislation requiring body cameras and civilian oversight, while Tennessee police reform advocates cite Chief Blackwood's family experience as evidence for comprehensive accountability measures protecting constitutional rights through systematic change. 3 years after the arrest incident, Creekside Valley Police Department emerges as national model for constitutional policing and community engagement, while Chief Blackwood's reform efforts gain credibility through personal experience with discrimination that validates community grievances and institutional accountability needs. The Blackwood Protocols become mandatory training for Tennessee law enforcement, while federal requirements emphasize constitutional compliance over arrest statistics. Kiana's experience influences police academy curriculum nationwide as case study in civil rights protection and institutional accountability. Kiana completes her graduate degree with thesis on police legitimacy that incorporates personal experience with institutional discrimination. Her academic work influences criminal justice education, while her community organizing creates bridges between law enforcement and neighborhoods historically affected by biased policing. Chief Blackwood's leadership extends beyond Creekside through consulting work, helping other departments implement constitutional policing reforms. His family's experience provides authentic understanding of community perspectives, while his administrative expertise guides institutional change. Federal oversight transitions from crisis management to partnership as sustained constitutional compliance demonstrates departmental commitment to civil rights protection. The consent decree becomes template for police reform, while community trust reaches levels that enable collaborative public safety approaches. Officer Valdez advances to detective, while his constitutional compliance during misconduct incident establishes template for career development through integrity rather than colleague loyalty. His promotion demonstrates how reform creates opportunities for officers committed to community service. Captain Reeves assumes chief deputy role, while her administrative response to misconduct establishes precedent for accountability that community relationships require. Her leadership development creates succession planning that sustains reform beyond individual personalities. Dr. Barnes establishes medical professional network advocating for police accountability, while her witness testimony becomes template for community intervention during constitutional violations. Her emergency room experience guides healthcare provider training about documenting police misconduct. Zoe Campbell's journalism career flourishes through investigative reporting about police accountability, while her social media documentation influences citizen journalism standards. Her coverage of reform implementation provides community transparency that sustains institutional change. The community center expands programming through partnerships with reformed police department, while Kiana's volunteer coordination creates model for police community collaboration. Youth programs include constitutional education that empowers next generation to protect civil rights. Federal legislation influenced by Tennessee reform experience requires enhanced accountability measures, while Chief Blackwood's testimony before Congress demonstrates how personal experience can validate community concerns about institutional discrimination and constitutional violations. Research demonstrates significant improvement in community trust and constitutional compliance, while crime reduction occurs through collaborative approaches rather than aggressive enforcement that previously characterized departmental culture. Inspector Noble's Professional Standards Division becomes Regional Training Center, while her investigation procedures influence statewide accountability mechanisms. Her enforcement of constitutional standards creates template for administrative response to civil rights violations. Most importantly, the story demonstrates how family connections can create accountability when institutional systems fail, while proving that authentic reform requires personal understanding of community experiences with police misconduct and constitutional violations. The transformation shows that sustainable policing requires constitutional foundation built through community trust rather than fear-based control that violates civil rights, while authentic leadership emerges through personal experience with institutional problems requiring systematic change. Chief Blackwood's legacy extends beyond policy implementation to cultural transformation that protects constitutional rights through accountability rather than administrative rhetoric, while his daughter's experience validates community grievances through family understanding of discrimination. 10 years later, Creekside Valley becomes destination for police reform tours, while other departments study how personal experience can catalyze institutional change when leadership possesses courage to confront uncomfortable truths about discriminatory practices and constitutional compliance failures. The incident proves that justice delayed is not justice denied when family connections enable accountability, while constitutional protection requires both individual courage and institutional mechanisms, ensuring equal treatment regardless of demographic characteristics or social status. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.